I should have known something was wrong when Marcus started working late every Tuesday. Not because he was dedicated to his job. God knows that man had never shown an ounce of ambition in the 3 years we'd been together, but because he'd shower immediately when he got home, scrubbing himself like he was washing away evidence. But I trusted him. I trusted them both. That was my first mistake. The discovery happened on a Thursday evening in October, the kind of crisp autumn day that should have been perfect. I was supposed to be at my evening yoga class, but I'd forgotten my water bottle and turned back home. Our apartment was only 5 minutes from the studio, so I figured I'd grab it and still make it in time for the opening meditation. I used my key quietly, not wanting to startle Marcus if he was napping on the couch. He'd been claiming exhaustion from all those late nights at the office. The living room was empty, but I could hear voices coming from our bedroom. Low, intimate murmurs that made my stomach clench with an instinct I tried to ignore. Maybe he was on a work call. Maybe it was the TV. Maybe I was paranoid. I crept down the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird desperate to escape. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and through that sliver of space I saw them. Marcus was on our bed, the bed we'd picked out together at IKEA last spring, the one we'd spent an entire Saturday afternoon assembling while arguing about the instruction manual. He was naked, his back to me, moving in a rhythm that was achingly familiar. Beneath him, long auburn hair spilled across my pillow. Hair I'd braided countless times. Hair I'd helped dye that exact shade when she'd wanted to impress a guy in college. My sister Emma's hair. The world tilted sideways. My vision tunneled, and for a moment I thought I might actually pass out right there in the hallway. My water bottle slipped from my numb fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a dull thud. They didn't even hear it. Emma's legs were wrapped around Marcus's waist, and she was making these soft little sounds that I recognized. Not because they were particularly distinctive, but because I'd heard them through the thin walls of our childhood home whenever she brought guys over in high school. She'd always been louder than she realized. "You feel so much better than her," Emma whispered, her voice breathy and satisfied. "Sarah's always been so vanilla." My knees nearly buckled. Vanilla. That's what my own sister thought of me while she was fucking my boyfriend in my bed. "She has no idea," Marcus replied, his voice thick with exertion and something that sounded like amusement. "She trusts me completely. Trusts both of us." They laughed. They actually laughed. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, watching my entire life crumble into pieces at my feet. 3 years with Marcus, 25 years with Emma. My sister, my best friend, the person who'd held me when I cried over my first heartbreak. The person who'd helped me pick out the dress I wore on my first date with Marcus. My sister, who apparently thought I was vanilla. My boyfriend, who apparently thought I was a joke. I backed away from the door slowly, my bare feet silent on the floor. I grabbed my purse from the kitchen counter and left through the front door as quietly as I'd entered. My hands were shaking so badly that it took 3 tries to get my key into the lock. I drove to the yoga studio on autopilot, but instead of going inside, I sat in my car in the parking lot and stared at nothing. People walked past my windows, going about their normal Thursday evening routines, and I envied them their ordinary problems. Traffic jams and work deadlines and what to make for dinner suddenly seemed like luxuries compared to the crater that had just opened up in my chest. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma, "Hope yoga goes well. Love you, sis." I stared at that heart emoji until my eyes burned. Another text, this one from Marcus. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Love you, babe. Working late. Right." I turned off my phone and drove to the only place that felt safe, my parents' house. Mom was in the kitchen making her famous lasagna when I walked in, and one look at my face had her pulling me into her arms without questions. "Oh, honey," she murmured into my hair. "What happened?" I couldn't tell her. "Not yet." "How do you explain that your sister, her daughter, was sleeping with your boyfriend? How do you destroy a mother's image of her children in one brutal confession?" Marcus and I had a fight. I managed, which wasn't technically a lie. We would have a fight once I figured out how to form words again. Mom made me a plate of food I couldn't eat and a cup of tea that went cold while I sat at their kitchen table, staring at the scratches in the wood. Every mark told a story. Homework sessions and craft projects and family dinners. Normal family moments with normal family problems. Dad came home from his evening walk and immediately went into protective mode, asking if he needed to have a talk with Marcus. I almost laughed at the idea of my gentle accountant father confronting anyone, but the offer warmed something in my chest that had gone cold. I stayed the night in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by faded boy band posters and swimming trophies from high school. The twin bed felt impossibly small after sharing a queen with Marcus for 2 years, but the smallness was comforting somehow. Contained. Safe. I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay there replaying every interaction between Marcus and Emma, looking for signs I'd missed. How long had this been going on? The Tuesday work nights had only started a few months ago, but what about before that? Had they been finding other times, other places? Emma had been around a lot lately, more than usual. She'd started joining us for dinner once a week, claiming she was lonely since her last breakup in June. She'd curl up on our couch afterward, stealing Marcus's spot when he went to get more wine, and the three of us would watch movies like the happy little family we'd never be. Had they been planning it even then? Had they exchanged glances when I wasn't looking? Had Emma been studying my relationship, looking for weaknesses to exploit? The thought made me physically sick. I remembered the way she'd complimented Marcus on his new haircut last month, running her fingers through it in a way that had seemed sisterly at the time. The way she'd laughed a little too hard at his jokes. The way she'd started dressing up more when she came over, trading her usual jeans and t-shirts for low-cut tops and skirts that showed off her legs. I'd thought she was rebuilding her confidence after her breakup. I'd been so stupid. My phone had 17 missed calls by morning, 12 from Marcus, 5 from Emma. I listened to the voicemails while Mom made me breakfast I wouldn't eat. Marcus first. "Hey babe, I got home and you weren't here. Your car's gone. Are you okay? Call me back." Then, "Sarah, I'm getting worried. Your mom said you're not feeling well, but you're not answering your phone. What's going on?" By the 5th message, his tone had shifted. "Look, I don't know what's wrong, but ignoring me isn't going to fix it. We need to talk. Come home." Emma's messages were worse somehow. Sickeningly sweet concern mixed with casual mentions of Marcus. "Sarah, where are you? Marcus called me looking for you. He's really worried." And later, "I stopped by your apartment to check on you, but Marcus said you still weren't home. This isn't like you. Please call me back." The image of Emma in my apartment, probably in the same clothes she'd worn to fuck my boyfriend, sitting on my couch and pretending to be concerned while Marcus pretended to be a devoted partner, made me want to break something. But I didn't break anything. Instead, I sat at my parents' kitchen table and felt something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. It wasn't anger yet. That would come later. It was something cleaner and sharper. Resolve, maybe. Or the first stirrings of a plan. I called in sick to work, which wasn't difficult since I'd thrown up twice already that morning. My boss, Janet, made appropriately sympathetic noises and told me to take the weekend if I needed it. I needed it. Marcus showed up at my parents' house around noon. I watched from my bedroom window as he got out of his car, straightening his shirt and running a hand through his hair, the same hair Emma had been playing with. He looked nervous but determined, like a man preparing to smooth over a minor disagreement. He had no idea what was coming. Mom intercepted him at the door, and I could hear their muted conversation from upstairs. She was being polite but cool, which meant she suspected something more serious than a simple fight. Mom had always been protective of Emma and me, and she'd never fully warmed to Marcus, though she'd never said why. Maybe she'd seen something I'd missed. "Sarah?" Marcus called up the stairs. "Can we talk?" I came down slowly, taking my time on each step. He was standing in our front hallway, hands shoved in his pockets, trying to look casual, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted around like he was looking for an escape route. Good. Let him be nervous. "Hey," he said when I reached the bottom of the stairs. "You look tired." I stared at him. This man I'd lived with for 2 years, shared meals and bills and dreams with. He looked the same as always, brown hair that was always slightly messy, green eyes that crinkled when he smiled, the small scar on his chin from a childhood accident he'd told me about on our 3rd date. But now all I could see was the way he'd moved over my sister, the way he'd laughed about my trust. "I'm fine," I said. "You're not fine. You disappeared last night without a word. You're not answering your phone. Your mom said you were sick, but I saw you." The words came out flat and calm, like I was commenting on the weather. Marcus blinked, confusion replacing the nervous energy. "Saw me where?" "In our bedroom. With Emma." The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, and I felt a flicker of satisfaction at his obvious panic. Sarah, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. My voice was still calm, still flat. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I was impressed by my own composure. I came home to get my water bottle. You were fucking my sister in our bed. He flinched at the profanity. Marcus had always been oddly prudish about language, another thing that should have been a red flag. Emma apparently didn't mind his sensibilities. It's not what you think, he said, which was possibly the most cliched response in the history of infidelity. It just happened. We didn't plan it. How long? Sarah, how long, Marcus? His shoulders slumped in defeat. 2 months. 2 months. 8 weeks of lies and deception and Tuesday night work emergencies. 8 weeks of Emma hugging me goodbye after family dinners, knowing she was going to go fuck my boyfriend. Do you love her? I asked. The question seemed to surprise him. He ran a hand through his hair again, a nervous habit I'd once found endearing. It's complicated. It's really not. Do you love her? A long pause. Then quietly, yes. That one word hit me harder than watching them together had. The sex could have been just sex, a moment of weakness or stupidity. But love? Love meant this had been building for longer than 2 months. Love meant I'd been living a lie for God knows how long. Love meant I'd already lost, even before I knew we were fighting. Okay, I said. Marcus looked relieved, like he'd expected screaming or tears or thrown objects. I could see him preparing for the next phase of this conversation, the part where he'd probably tell me they hadn't meant for it to happen, that they'd tried to fight their feelings, that they'd never wanted to hurt me. I didn't give him the chance. I want you out of the apartment by Sunday. Sarah, wait. We should talk about this. We can work through... No. The word came out sharper than I'd intended, but I didn't regret it. We can't work through anything. You love my sister. She apparently thinks I'm vanilla and boring. You both think I'm a joke. There's nothing to work through. That's not true. We never said... I heard you laughing. My composure was starting to crack, just slightly. I heard you both laughing about how much I trust you. Marcus winced. We weren't laughing at you. We were just... The situation is fucked up, and sometimes you laugh when you don't know what else to do. Get out. Sarah. Get out of my parents' house. Get your stuff out of our apartment. And get out of my life. He stood there for another moment, maybe hoping I'd change my mind or break down or give him an opening to explain himself further. When I didn't, he nodded slowly. I'll get my things, he said. And Sarah? I'm sorry. I really am. I watched him walk back to his car and I felt nothing. The crying would come later, along with the anger and the grief and the planning. But in that moment, I just felt empty. Empty, but oddly clear. Mom appeared beside me as Marcus drove away, sliding an arm around my shoulders. You okay, sweetheart? Not yet, I said. But I will be. I meant it, though I wasn't sure how yet. The tears came that night, along with the rage I'd been holding back. I cried for the 3 years I'd wasted on Marcus, for the trust I'd placed in Emma, for the future I'd been planning that would never exist. I cried until my eyes were swollen and my throat was raw and there was nothing left. Then I got angry. Emma called while I was in the middle of my breakdown, and I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Maybe curiosity about what she'd say, maybe a masochistic need to hear her voice. Sarah? She sounded genuinely worried, which would have been touching if she hadn't been fucking my boyfriend for 2 months. Marcus told me what happened. I need to explain. Explain what? My voice was hoarse from crying but steady. Explain how you've been screwing my boyfriend behind my back? Explain how you think I'm vanilla? Explain how you and Marcus laugh about how much I trust you? Silence on the other end of the line. You heard that? She said finally. I heard everything. More silence. Then, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I tried to stay away, but what? He's just so irresistible? You couldn't help yourself? It's not like that. We have a connection. Something real? I almost laughed. A connection. How romantic. I'm sure Mom and Dad will be thrilled to hear about your connection with my boyfriend. You can't tell them. For the first time, Emma sounded scared. Sarah, please. It would destroy them. Like you destroyed me? That wasn't... I didn't want to hurt you. But you did it anyway. Another pause. Yes. At least she was honest. I love him, Emma said quietly. I know that doesn't make it right, but I do. And he loves me. I know. He told me. We want to be together. Really together, not sneaking around. Congratulations. You can have him. Sarah, I hung up. My phone rang again immediately, then again, then again. I turned it off and threw it in my dresser drawer. I spent the weekend at my parents' house, letting them take care of me like I was 12 years old with the flu. Mom made all my favorite foods. Dad brought me tea and awkwardly patted my shoulder. They didn't ask questions, which I appreciated more than I could express. On Sunday evening, I drove back to my apartment. Marcus's car was gone, which was a relief. I wasn't ready to see him again, not yet. The apartment felt different, empty in a way that had nothing to do with Marcus's missing clothes and toiletries. The silence was oppressive, and I found myself turning on the TV just to have some noise. There was a note on the kitchen counter, written in Marcus's careful handwriting, "Sarah, I took only my things. I left my key. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I hope someday you can forgive me. You deserve better than what I gave you. M." I read it twice, then crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. The apartment was mine now. The lease was in my name, and I could afford the rent on my own, though it would be tight. I walked through the rooms, mentally rearranging furniture and planning changes. I'd get new sheets for the bed. There was no way I was sleeping on the ones they'd used. Maybe new curtains too. A fresh coat of paint. I was standing in the bedroom, mentally cataloging what needed to be replaced, when I noticed something on the dresser. A small silver bracelet that wasn't mine. Emma's bracelet, the one our grandmother had given her for her 16th birthday. She'd left it behind like a fucking calling card. I picked up the bracelet, and for the first time since Thursday night, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was the first crack in the numbness that had surrounded me for 3 days. Emma wanted Marcus? She could have him. But I was going to make sure they both paid for what they'd done to me. I just needed to figure out how. The plan started forming slowly over the course of the following week. I went back to work, told my coworkers that Marcus and I had broken up, and deflected their well-meaning questions with vague references to growing apart. I wasn't ready to tell anyone the whole truth yet. Emma tried to call several times, but I didn't answer. She sent texts apologizing and asking to meet for coffee so we could talk through this like adults. I deleted them without responding. Marcus, to his credit, left me alone. It was my coworker Jessica who inadvertently planted the seed that would grow into my revenge. "I'm sorry about you and Marcus," she said one afternoon as we grabbed coffee from the office kitchen. "But honestly, I never thought he was good enough for you anyway." "Why not?" Jessica shrugged. "He just seemed, I don't know, unmotivated, like he was coasting through life. You're ambitious, you're driven, you have goals. He was content to just exist." She was right. I'd known it even while we were together, but I'd told myself that opposites attract, that his laid-back nature balanced out my type A personality. In reality, I'd been carrying the relationship while he went along for the ride. Plus, Jessica continued, his brother is way hotter. I nearly choked on my coffee. His brother? Jake? The one who came to your birthday party last year? Tall, dark hair, those incredible blue eyes? He's a lawyer, right? Much better catch than Marcus, if you ask me. I remembered Jake, though we'd barely spoken at my party. He was 2 years older than Marcus, and they looked similar enough that the family resemblance was obvious, but different enough that you'd never mistake them for each other. Where Marcus was soft around the edges, Jake was all sharp lines and controlled energy. Where Marcus dressed like he'd grabbed whatever was closest to his bed, Jake wore suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I'd gotten the impression that the brothers weren't particularly close. Jake had been polite but distant, staying for exactly long enough to be respectful before making his excuses and leaving. "Are they close?" I asked Jessica, trying to sound casual. "From what Marcus told you? Not really. Something about Jake being the golden child who went to law school while Marcus was the screw-up who couldn't hold down a job. Classic sibling rivalry stuff." I filed that information away. That night, I looked Jake up on LinkedIn. Jessica was right. He was a lawyer, a partner at a prestigious firm downtown. His profile picture showed a man in his early 30s with dark hair and serious blue eyes, wearing a suit that screamed success. Then I found his Instagram. Jake's social media presence was carefully curated, but not overly polished. Photos of him at charity events, hiking trips, dinners at expensive restaurants. A few pictures with women, but nothing that screamed serious relationship. He looked confident, successful, and completely out of my league. Perfect. I spent hours scrolling through his posts, studying his interests and lifestyle. He liked good wine, expensive restaurants, and outdoor activities. He volunteered with a literacy program for underprivileged kids. He traveled frequently for work and pleasure. Most importantly, he appeared to be single. Even more importantly, he was exactly the kind of man who would make Marcus feel inferior. The plan that formed in my mind was audacious and potentially disastrous, but it felt right in a way that nothing had felt since I'd seen Emma and Marcus together. If they wanted to be together, fine. But I was going to make sure Marcus regretted losing me for the rest of his life. I was going to make Jake fall in love with me, and then I was going to marry him. The first step was engineering a meeting that would seem natural. I couldn't just show up at his office or slide into his DMS without looking desperate or crazy. I needed a connection, a reason to be in his orbit. The answer came from an unexpected source, Marcus himself. He texted me 2 weeks after moving out. "I left some books at the apartment. Can I come get them sometime this week?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding, "I'll drop them off at your office tomorrow." It was a power play, making him wait and putting myself in control of the interaction, but it was also reconnaissance. I needed to see where he worked, what his life looked like without me. Marcus's office was in a generic downtown building, the kind of place that housed insurance agencies and small accounting firms. He worked for a property management company, doing maintenance coordination for rental properties. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was steady, and it had been enough for the life we'd planned together. It felt pathetic now. I handed him the box of books, mostly science fiction novels and a few computer programming guides he'd bought but never read, and watched him shift uncomfortably in the fluorescent-lit lobby. "Thank you," he said. "You didn't have to bring these yourself. It's fine. I was in the area." A lie, but he didn't need to know that. "How are you doing?" he asked, and he sounded like he genuinely wanted to know. "I'm good," I said, which was also a lie, but a more complicated one. I wasn't good, but I was better. Focused, determined. "And Emma?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, and I hated myself for asking. Marcus's face flushed. We're taking things slow, trying to figure out what this means." "How thoughtful of you both." He winced at the sarcasm. "Sarah, I know you hate us right now, and you have every right to. But I hope someday—" "Marcus, let me save you some time." "I don't hate you. I don't care enough to hate you." It was a calculated cruelty, designed to hit him where it would hurt most. Marcus had always needed to feel important, needed to be the center of attention. Telling him he was irrelevant was worse than screaming or crying or throwing his books at his head. The hurt in his eyes was deeply satisfying. "I should go," I said. "Enjoy your books." I walked away without looking back, but I could feel him watching me leave. Phase 1 complete. That evening, I created a fake social media account and started following people in Jake's orbit. Not Jake himself, that would be too obvious, but his colleagues, his friends, people who liked and commented on his posts. I learned that he played in a recreational soccer league on Thursday nights. I learned that he volunteered at the Literacy Center on Saturday mornings. I learned that he was part of a wine tasting group that met monthly at different restaurants around the city. I also learned that his law firm was hosting a charity gala in 3 weeks to raise money for a domestic violence shelter. Perfect. I bought a ticket to the gala. $500 I couldn't really afford, but a necessary investment in my future. I told myself I was supporting a good cause, which was true, even if my motives weren't entirely altruistic. Then I went shopping. I'd never owned a dress that cost more than $200, but for this, I splurged. Black, elegant, sophisticated without being flashy. The kind of dress that would make me look like I belonged in Jake's world. I booked appointments for hair, makeup, and nails. I researched the charity, the law firm, and the other sponsors so I could make intelligent conversation. And I practiced. Standing in front of my bathroom mirror, I rehearsed introducing myself, making small talk, being charming and interesting and completely unlike the vanilla woman my sister had described. 3 weeks later, I stood outside the ballroom of the city's most expensive hotel, wearing my new dress and a confidence I didn't entirely feel. It was time to meet my future husband. Jake was even more handsome in person than he'd been in photos. He stood near the bar, talking to a group of colleagues, and I watched him from across the room while I worked up the courage to approach. He was taller than Marcus, probably 6'2" to Marcus's 5'10". His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his navy suit fit him like it had been tailored specifically for his body. When he smiled at something one of his companions said, I caught a glimpse of straight white teeth and laugh lines that made him look approachable despite his polished exterior. He was completely out of my league, and that made this both more terrifying and more necessary. I waited until he stepped away from his group to refill his drink, then I made my move. "Excuse me," I said, appearing at his elbow as he waited for the bartender. "I think we have a mutual acquaintance." He turned toward me, and up close his eyes were even bluer than they'd looked in photos. He was studying my face with polite curiosity, clearly trying to place me. "Oh?" he said. "Who might that be?" "Marcus Wheeler, your brother." Recognition flickered across his features, followed quickly by what might have been surprise or concern. "You're Sarah," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am. And you're Jake." We shook hands, his grip firm and warm, and I felt a little thrill of victory. He knew who I was, which meant Marcus had talked about me. Good. "I heard about—" Jake paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I heard that you and Marcus broke up." "I'm sorry." "Thank you. It was for the best." The bartender appeared, and Jake ordered a whiskey neat while I asked for a glass of the featured white wine. He paid for both drinks without being asked, a casual gesture that somehow impressed me more than the expensive suit. "So," he said as we stepped away from the bar, "what brings you to this particular event? Are you involved with the shelter?" "I am now," I said, which was technically true since I'd made a donation along with buying my ticket. "I think it's important to support organizations that help women rebuild their lives after difficult situations." Jake nodded approvingly. "Absolutely. The work they do is incredible. Have you had a chance to speak with any of their staff tonight?" I hadn't, but I spent the next 20 minutes letting Jake introduce me to various people involved with the charity, listening to their stories and asking thoughtful questions. It wasn't difficult to be genuinely interested. The work was important, and the people were passionate about their cause. But I was also acutely aware of Jake beside me, the way he listened intently when others spoke, the way he asked follow-up questions that showed he was actually paying attention. He was charming without trying too hard, confident without being arrogant. He was everything Marcus wasn't. "Would you like to dance?" he asked after we'd finished talking to the shelter's director. The band was playing something slow and romantic, and couples were swaying on the small dance floor near the stage. I nodded, and he led me onto the floor with one hand resting lightly on my lower back. Jake was a good dancer, confident and smooth without being showy. He held me at the appropriate distance for a first dance with someone he'd just met, but there was something in the way he looked at me that made my pulse quicken. "So," he said as we moved to the music, "I have to ask, is this weird for you? Dancing with your ex-boyfriend's brother?" I appreciated the directness. "A little," I admitted. "Is it weird for you?" "Also a little." He smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. "But I'm finding that I don't mind as much as I thought I would." "Why's that?" "Because you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Jake was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Marcus described you as sweet, quiet, the type who'd rather stay home and watch Netflix than go out. And instead you got someone who shows up to charity galas and asks about domestic violence prevention programs?" "Something like that, yeah." I smiled back at him. Maybe Marcus didn't know me as well as he thought he did. It was a calculated comment, designed to plant seeds of doubt about his brother while positioning myself as mysterious and underestimated. Based on the way Jake's eyes sharpened with interest, it worked. We danced 2 more songs, talked through dinner, and exchanged business cards afterward. By the time I left the hotel, I had Jake's personal phone number and a promise that he'd call soon. I drove home feeling victorious and slightly guilty in equal measure. Jake seemed like a genuinely good person, and I was about to manipulate him for my own revenge. It wasn't fair to him, but fairness had gone out the window the moment I'd found Emma and Marcus together. Besides, I told myself, it wasn't like I was planning to break his heart. I just wanted to marry him. The distinction felt important, even if I couldn't exactly explain why. Jake called 2 days later. "Sarah? It's Jake Wheeler, from the gala." As if I could have forgotten. "Hi," I said, letting a smile creep into my voice. "I was wondering if I'd hear from you." "I was wondering the same thing about myself," he admitted. "This is complicated." "It doesn't have to be. My brother just broke up with you. There are probably rules about this kind of thing." "What kind of rules?" "The kind that say I shouldn't be asking you out to dinner." My heart did a little skip. "Are you asking me out to dinner?" A pause. "Would you say yes if I were? Why don't you ask and find out?" He laughed, a low sound that sent warmth spreading through my chest. "Sarah, would you like to have dinner with me this Friday?" "I'd love to." We made plans to meet at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place Marcus could never have afforded. After I hung up, I sat on my couch staring at my phone and feeling a confusing mix of emotions. Satisfaction that my plan was working, excitement about seeing Jake again, and underneath it all, a tiny voice whispering that maybe I was in over my head. I told it to shut up. Our first dinner was perfect, which should have made me feel guilty, but instead filled me with a cold satisfaction. Jake picked me up at 7 sharp, looking devastating in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. He opened my car door, complimented my dress without being sleazy about it, and maintained just enough conversation during the drive to keep things from being awkward. The restaurant was the kind of place I'd only read about in magazines: dim lighting, cloth napkins, servers who knew which fork to bring for the second course. Marcus had taken me to Olive Garden for our 6-month anniversary. Jake ordered wine that cost more than Marcus spent on groceries in a week, and when I admitted I didn't know much about wine, he explained the differences between regions and grape varieties without making me feel stupid. "So tell me about yourself," he said after we'd ordered. "What do you do when you're not attending charity galas?" "I work in marketing for a mid-sized tech company," I said. "Nothing glamorous, but I like the strategy aspect of it. Figuring out what motivates people, what makes them act." It was true, but I chose those words deliberately. I wanted him to see me as someone who understood motivation and psychology. Someone who could play the long game. "That sounds fascinating," Jake said, and he seemed to mean it. "What's your favorite campaign you've worked on?" I told him about a project I'd led to rebrand a struggling app, how we'd repositioned it from a productivity tool to a lifestyle enhancement, how we'd studied the target demographic and crafted messages that spoke to their deepest desires and insecurities. I watched his eyes light up as I talked about strategy and execution. "You're not what I expected at all," he said when I finished. "So you keep saying. What exactly did Marcus tell you about me?" Jake hesitated, swirling his wine. "He made you sound..." He paused, clearly choosing his words carefully. "Simpler than you are." "Simpler how?" "Like someone who was content to follow his lead. Someone who didn't have her own ambitions or opinions." Jake met my eyes. "But listening to you talk about your work, seeing you at the gala, you're clearly someone who knows what she wants and goes after it." If only he knew how right he was. Maybe Marcus only saw what he wanted to see. I said, "Some men prefer women who don't challenge them. That sounds lonely for everyone involved." It was. We talked through 3 courses, and I found myself genuinely enjoying his company. Jake was intelligent, thoughtful, and funny in a dry way that caught me off guard. He told me about a case he'd worked on involving a client who'd tried to trademark the word "the," and I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my tiramisu. When he dropped me off at my apartment, he walked me to the door but didn't invite himself in or try to kiss me. Instead, he took my hand and squeezed it gently. "I had a really good time tonight," he said. "So did I. Would you like to do it again?" "Yes," I said, and meant it more than I'd expected to. After he left, I sat in my apartment analyzing the evening like it was a marketing campaign. Jake was interested, that much was clear, but he was also cautious, probably because of the Marcus situation. I needed to be patient, let him come to me, make him feel like pursuing me was his idea. I also needed to be careful not to let my own feelings complicate things, because the truth was, I'd enjoyed myself more than I'd planned to. Jake was easy to talk to, easy to be around. Under different circumstances, I might have genuinely fallen for him. But these weren't different circumstances. This was revenge, and I couldn't afford to forget that. Jake called the next day to thank me for dinner, and we made plans for the following weekend. This time he suggested something more casual, a Saturday afternoon at the farmer's market followed by lunch at a bistro he liked. It was the kind of date Marcus would never have planned, thoughtful and creative without being pretentious. I spent the week between our dates doing more research. I learned that Jake had graduated summa cum laude from law school, that he'd turned down offers from bigger firms to work somewhere that focused on social justice cases. I learned that his parents lived in the same suburb where Marcus still lived, that they'd always held Jake up as the successful son while treating Marcus like the family disappointment. Perfect. The sibling rivalry angle would make my eventual victory even sweeter. I also learned that Jake had been engaged once, about 3 years ago, to a woman named Catherine who worked in finance. They'd broken up 6 months before the wedding, and from what I could piece together from social media and public records, it had been her decision. There were no messy details online, just a quiet dissolution of what had seemed like a perfect relationship. I filed that information away too. Everyone had weak spots, and a broken engagement suggested that Jake's might be commitment or trust issues. Our second date was even better than the first. Jake met me at the farmer's market at 10 in the morning, looking unfairly handsome in jeans and a navy sweater that brought out his eyes. We wandered through the stalls, buying fresh bread and cheese and strawberries that we ate as we walked. He told me about the vendors he knew, asked my opinion on different vegetables, and somehow made grocery shopping feel romantic. You know, he said as we sat at the bistro afterward, sharing a plate of bruschetta, I keep waiting for this to feel weird. Does it? No, and that's what's weird. He smiled ruefully. I thought dating my brother's ex would be, he shrugged. I don't know. Awkward? Wrong? But it doesn't feel wrong. Maybe that's because I was never really Marcus's type, I said. And he was never really mine. What is your type? The question was casual, but I could see the real interest in his eyes. This was my chance to start planting the idea that he was exactly what I'd been looking for. Someone ambitious, I said. Someone who knows what they want and isn't afraid to work for it. Someone who can challenge me intellectually. I paused, pretending to think. Someone who cares about making a difference in the world, not just getting by. It was a perfect description of Jake and the opposite of Marcus, and I could see that he understood the implication. That sounds like a tall order, he said. I'd rather be alone than settle for less than I deserve. Jake leaned back in his chair, studying me with those blue eyes. You know, I think Marcus was an idiot to let you go. If only he knew Marcus hadn't let me go, he'd chosen my sister over me. But Jake didn't need to know that detail. Not yet. His loss, I said with a shrug that suggested I'd moved on completely. Jake drove me home afterward, and this time when he walked me to my door, there was a moment of hesitation before he leaned down and kissed me. It was soft, tentative, asking permission rather than taking. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I should probably feel guilty about this, he murmured. But you don't? No. Should I? I reached up and touched his cheek. Marcus and I are over. We were never right for each other anyway. I paused, letting the words sink in. Besides, he's moved on too. Jake pulled back slightly. He has? I nodded, as if it was no big deal. He's seeing someone new. Has been for a while, actually. It wasn't technically a lie. Marcus was seeing someone new. Emma just happened to be my sister, and they'd started seeing each other while we were still together. But Jake didn't need those details. Relief flickered across Jake's features, followed quickly by something that looked like anger. He moved on fast, Jake said, his voice carefully neutral. Apparently, he'd been thinking about it for a while. Another non-lie that painted Marcus in the worst possible light. I guess when you know something's not working, there's no point in dragging it out. Jake's jaw tightened. Still, that seems... He shook his head. Never mind. It's not my business. It's really okay, I said. I'm happy for him. And I'm happy that I get to be here with you. That earned me another kiss, deeper this time. And when Jake finally pulled away, his eyes were dark with something that might have been desire or determination or both. I should go, he said, but he didn't move. You should, I agreed, not stepping back. He kissed me one more time, quick and almost desperate, then forced himself to step away. I'll call you, he said. I hope so. I watched him drive away, then went inside and immediately called my friend Jessica. Holy shit, she said when I told her about the date. You're actually doing this. Doing what? Dating Jake Wheeler, Marcus's brother. Jessica had been one of the few people I'd told the whole truth about Marcus and Emma, partly because I'd needed someone to vent to, and partly because I'd needed someone to help me keep my story straight. This is either the best revenge plot in history, or you're about to create a family drama that will make the Kardashians look subtle. Maybe both. Sarah, are you sure about this? Jessica's voice was careful. I mean, I get wanting to make Marcus pay for what he did, but Jake seems like a decent guy. Is it fair to use him like this? The question I'd been avoiding. Who says I'm using him? Come on. You bought a $500 dress to meet him at a charity gala. You're not exactly being spontaneous here. So what if I had a plan? That doesn't mean I can't genuinely like him too. Do you genuinely like him? I was quiet for a long moment. Yes, I said finally. I do. Then what happens when he finds out about Emma and Marcus? Because he will find out, Sarah. These things always come out. Maybe. But by then it won't matter. What do you mean? By then he'll be in love with me. Jessica sighed. You're playing with fire. I know. And you're going to get burned. Maybe. But so will they. After I hung up, I sat in my living room staring at my phone. Jessica was right. I was playing with fire. But I'd been burned already by two people who were supposed to love me. If I got burned again while making them pay, at least it would be on my terms. Jake and I fell into a pattern over the next few weeks. Dinner dates, weekend activities, long phone conversations that stretched late into the night. He was courting me in an old-fashioned way that Marcus had never bothered with. Flowers for no reason, opening doors, actually listening when I talked about my day. And I was falling for him, which wasn't part of the plan. The realization hit me during our 4th date, when Jake surprised me with tickets to a concert I'd mentioned wanting to see. We were sitting in the theater, his hand warm in mine, listening to a string quartet play Vivaldi, and I found myself thinking that this was what happiness felt like. Not the desperate, clingy happiness I'd felt with Marcus, always worried he might lose interest or leave. This was something steadier, built on actual compatibility and mutual respect. It should have been perfect. Instead, it terrified me, because I was lying to him. Every day, every conversation, every kiss was built on a foundation of deception. Jake thought he was dating a woman who'd had an amicable breakup with his brother. He had no idea that Marcus had cheated on me with my own sister, or that I was dating him specifically to make Marcus suffer. The guilt was eating at me, but so was the fear that Jake would leave if he knew the truth. And underneath both of those feelings was a cold, hard knot of anger that hadn't diminished at all. Every time I started to feel bad about my deception, I remembered the sound of Marcus and Emma laughing about my trust. I remembered Emma calling me vanilla. I remembered Marcus telling Emma she felt better than me. The anger was what kept me going when the guilt threatened to overwhelm me. 6 weeks into our relationship, Jake invited me to dinner at his parents' house. I said yes, of course, but the invitation sent me into a panic. Marcus would probably be there, and even if he wasn't, his parents would recognize me as his ex-girlfriend. How was Jake planning to explain that? "My parents are curious about you," Jake said when he picked me up that Sunday. "I've told them we're dating, obviously. What did you tell them about Marcus and me?" Jake glanced over at me, and I could see the tension in his shoulders. "I told them you and Marcus broke up a few months ago and that we met afterward." He paused. They weren't thrilled. "I bet." My mother's exact words were, "That seems complicated, Jacob." He smiled ruefully. "She always uses my full name when she disapproves of something." "And your father?" He asked if I was sure I knew what I was doing. "Are you?" "Sure, Jake reached over and took my hand. "I've never been more sure of anything." The words should have made me happy. Instead, they made me feel like the worst person alive. Jake's parents lived in a colonial house in an affluent suburb, the kind of neighborhood where the lawns were perfectly manicured and the driveways held luxury cars. It was exactly the kind of place I'd imagined Marcus growing up, though somehow I'd never visited during our 3 years together. Mrs. Wheeler answered the door, a petite woman with silver hair and Jake's blue eyes. She smiled politely and welcomed me inside, but I could feel her evaluating me, trying to figure out what kind of woman would date 2 brothers in succession. "Sarah," she said, taking my coat. "It's nice to meet you." "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Wheeler. Please call me Linda." She led us into the living room, where Jake's father was waiting. He was tall like his sons, but broader, with gray hair and laugh lines that suggested he smiled often. "David, this is Sarah." We shook hands and I could feel him studying me too. But where Linda's assessment felt critical, David's felt merely curious. "Jake's told us a lot about you," David said. "All good things, I hope." "He seems quite taken with you," Linda said, and there was something in her voice that might have been warning or advice. Dinner was an elegant affair, roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, wine that probably cost more than I made in a day, conversation that flowed easily despite the underlying tension. Jake's parents were intelligent, cultured people who'd clearly given their sons every advantage. They asked about my work, my family, my interests, and they listened to my answers with genuine attention. I was actually starting to relax when Marcus walked in. "Sorry I'm late," he said, appearing in the dining room doorway. "Traffic was—" He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me. The color drained from his face, and for a moment, nobody spoke. "Marcus," Linda said carefully. "You remember Sarah?" Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes darting between Jake and me. "Sarah," his voice was hoarse. "Hi." "Hello, Marcus." The silence stretched until David cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "this is awkward." Jake reached over and took my hand, a gesture that was both possessive and protective. "Mom, Dad, I know this is unusual." "Unusual is one word for it?" Marcus said. He was still standing in the doorway, looking like he might bolt at any moment. "Marcus," Jake's voice carried a warning. "No, it's okay," I said. I turned to Marcus, maintaining eye contact. "How are you? How's Emma?" The question hit its target. Marcus flinched, and I saw understanding dawn in his parents' eyes. They might not know the details, but they knew enough to realize that Marcus had moved on quickly after our breakup. "She's fine," Marcus said quietly. "Emma?" Linda asked. "Who's Emma?" Another silence. Marcus looked trapped, and I felt a vicious satisfaction at his discomfort. "Emma's my sister," I said pleasantly. "She and Marcus are dating now." Linda's fork clattered against her plate. David's eyebrows rose toward his hairline. Jake's hand tightened around mine. "Your sister?" Linda's voice was faint. "When did this happen?" David asked. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear. "We ... He swallowed hard. "It's complicated." "It's really not," I said, still smiling. "They fell in love. These things happen." Jake was staring at his brother with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're dating Sarah's sister?" "Jake, her sister?" Jake's voice was getting louder. "I can explain." "How long?" Jake stood up and Marcus took a step back. "Jake, please." "How long have you been dating her sister, Marcus?" Marcus glanced at me, and I could see him calculating how much I might have told Jake. "A few months," he said finally. "How many months?" Another pause. "Since before Sarah and I broke up." The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Linda gasped. David muttered something under his breath. Jake went very, very still. "You cheated on Sarah with her sister," Jake said. "It wasn't a question." Marcus nodded miserably. "And you?" Jake turned to me. "Didn't think that was worth mentioning?" I met his eyes calmly. "You didn't ask." "I didn't ask?" Jake's voice was dangerously quiet. "I didn't ask if my brother had cheated on you? You asked if Marcus and I had broken up. We had..." "You asked if he'd moved on." "He had..." I shrugged. The details seemed irrelevant. Jake stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him processing the implications. That I'd lied by omission. That I'd let him think the breakup had been mutual. That I'd made him feel guilty for dating his brother's ex when his brother had been the one to betray me. "I think," David said into the silence, "that perhaps we should discuss this privately." Marcus, would you step into my study?" "That's not necessary," I said, standing up. "I should go." "Sarah," Jake started. "Thank you for dinner, Linda. It was lovely." I turned to Marcus. "Give Emma my love." I walked out of the dining room, collected my coat from the hall closet, and let myself out the front door. Behind me, I could hear raised voices, Jake and Marcus arguing, their parents trying to mediate. I didn't wait to hear the outcome. I was halfway to my car when Jake caught up with me. "Sarah, wait." I turned around. He looked angry and confused and hurt, and I hated that I was the cause of it. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "Tell you what? That your brother is an asshole? I figured you already knew that." Jake flinched. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I walked closer to him. "Marcus cheated on me with my sister. In my bed. In my apartment. For months." Jake's eyes widened and I pressed on. "I came home and found them together, and do you know what they were doing while they fucked? They were laughing about how much I trusted them." Jake looked stricken. "Sarah..." "So no, I didn't tell you the gory details. Because they don't matter. I was lying, and we both knew it. The details mattered enormously. They were the reason I was standing here, the reason I'd bought that black dress, the reason I'd engineered our meeting. What matters is that I'm here with you now." Jake studied my face in the dim light from the porch. "Is that true? Is that really all that matters?" It was a loaded question, and we both knew it. He was asking if I was with him for the right reasons, if my feelings were real, if this was about him or about revenge against Marcus. I reached up and touched his cheek. "Jake, these past 2 months with you have been the happiest I've been in years. You're kind, intelligent, ambitious, everything I've ever wanted in a partner." I paused. "Do you really think I'd let Marcus ruin that for me?" It was a masterful deflection, making it seem like staying with Jake was about moving past Marcus rather than getting back at him. And it worked. I could see Jake's expression soften, see him choosing to believe me. "No," he said quietly. "I don't think you would." He kissed me then, soft and sweet, and I kissed him back while trying to ignore the voice in my head that whispered I was the worst person alive. The confrontation with Marcus changed things between Jake and me. He was more protective now, more possessive, as if he was trying to make up for his brother's betrayal. He brought me flowers more often, planned more elaborate dates, told me he loved me for the first time while we were walking through the park on a crisp November evening. "I love you too," I said, and meant it more than I'd expected to, because I did love him. Somewhere between that first charity gala and Sunday dinner with his parents, I'd fallen completely for Jake Wheeler. He was everything Marcus wasn't: successful, attentive, emotionally available. He challenged me intellectually, supported my ambitions, and made me feel like the most important person in his world. The fact that I loved him should have made my revenge feel hollow. Instead, it made it feel more necessary than ever. Because Marcus had stolen more than just 3 years of my life when he chose Emma over me. He'd stolen my ability to trust, my faith in love, my belief that I deserved better. Jake was giving all of that back to me, and Marcus was going to pay for trying to take it away. I started planning the next phase of my revenge. Jake and I had been dating for 4 months when I brought up the subject of marriage. Not directly, I wasn't that bold. But I started mentioning friends who were getting engaged, pointing out cute wedding dresses in store windows, making casual comments about what I wanted for my future. "Do you want kids?" I asked one night as we were lying in bed after making love. Jake's apartment was everything Marcus's wasn't: spacious, tastefully decorated, clean. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, and the mattress probably cost more than my first car. "Someday," Jake said, running his fingers through my hair, "with the right person." What would make someone the right person? He was quiet for a moment, thinking, someone who shares my values, someone I can see growing old with. He turned to look at me. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am? That sounds like a tall order. Maybe, but I'd rather wait for the right person than settle for the wrong one. I curled closer to him, resting my head on his chest. I think that's smart. Marriage is too important to get wrong. Have you been married before? Jake asked. No. I came close once, but I shrugged. It wasn't right. It was a lie, but a calculated one. I wanted Jake to see me as someone who took commitment seriously, someone who wouldn't say yes to just anyone. What wasn't right about it? He was safe, I said. Comfortable, but there was no passion, no challenge. I realized I was settling, and that wasn't fair to either of us. It was a perfect description of how I'd felt with Marcus, and I could feel Jake's body tense slightly beneath me. What about now? He asked quietly. Now? Do you feel like you're settling now? I lifted my head to look at him. With you? No, never. I kissed him softly. You scare me a little, actually. Why? Because you make me want things I've never wanted before. Forever things. Jake's eyes darkened, and he rolled me onto my back, kissing me with an intensity that stole my breath. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I love you, he said. I love you too. And I did. God help me, I did. By spring, Jake and I were practically living together. I still had my apartment, but I spent most nights at his place. We'd developed routines: weekend farmers market trips, Wednesday night dinners at our favorite Thai restaurant, Sunday morning runs along the lake. We talked about everything: work, politics, books, dreams for the future. I met his friends and co-workers. He integrated seamlessly into my life. It was perfect, which made what I was planning feel simultaneously essential and monstrous. The engagement ring appeared in Jake's sock drawer in early May. I found it by accident while looking for a phone charger, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw the small velvet box tucked behind his running socks. I didn't open it. I had enough self-control for that, but I could tell from the size and shape of the box that it was expensive. Jake was going to propose. Soon, from the looks of it. I should have been thrilled. This was what I'd been working toward for 8 months. But instead, I felt a confusing mix of elation and terror. Because once Jake proposed, once we were engaged, there would be no going back. Marcus would have to watch his brother marry the woman he'd thrown away for my sister. He'd have to smile and pretend to be happy while knowing that he'd lost me to someone better in every possible way. It would be the perfect revenge. So why did I feel like I was going to throw up? The proposal came 2 weeks later, during a weekend trip to Napa Valley that Jake had planned for my birthday. We were having dinner at a restaurant overlooking the vineyards, the kind of place that existed specifically for marriage proposals and anniversary celebrations. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and Jake looked nervous in a way I'd never seen before. "Sarah," he said as we finished our main course, "there's something I want to ask you." My heart started racing. This was it. The moment I'd been orchestrating for months. Jake reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the velvet box I'd seen in his drawer. He opened it to reveal a stunning solitaire diamond that caught the light and threw it back in brilliant sparkles. "I know we haven't been together very long," he said, "but I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He took my hand. "You make me want to be the best version of myself. You challenge me, you inspire me, you make me laugh even when I'm having the worst day." His voice was shaking slightly. "I can't imagine my life without you in it." He slid out of his chair and got down on one knee, and several other diners turned to watch. I could hear someone's phone camera clicking, capturing this moment for posterity. "Sarah Elizabeth Chen," Jake said, "will you marry me?" I stared at him, this wonderful, brilliant, successful man who was offering me everything I'd ever wanted, and felt my carefully constructed world tilt on its axis. Because I could see the love in his eyes, raw and honest and completely real. He wasn't proposing because I'd manipulated him into it. He was proposing because he genuinely deeply loved me, and I loved him too. More than I'd ever loved anyone, including Marcus. "Yes," I whispered, and then louder, "Yes, of course, yes." Jake slipped the ring onto my finger with hands that were shaking almost as much as mine. It fit perfectly, because of course he'd found a way to figure out my ring size without me noticing. The diamond was beautiful, classic, exactly what I would have chosen for myself. He stood up and kissed me, and the other diners applauded. The waiter appeared with champagne that Jake had obviously arranged in advance. Everything was perfect, except for the voice in my head that kept whispering that I was a fraud. We called our families from the hotel room that night. My parents were thrilled, my mother immediately launching into plans for engagement parties and wedding venues. Jake's parents were warm and welcoming, telling me how happy they were to have me joining the family. Even the awkwardness from that disastrous Sunday dinner seemed to have been forgiven or forgotten. "What about Marcus?" I asked after Jake hung up with his parents. Jake's expression darkened slightly. "What about him? Are you going to tell him we're engaged?" "He'll find out." Jake pulled me closer. "But I'm not calling him specifically to share the news, if that's what you're asking." I curled against his side, admiring the way my new ring caught the light. "Are things still tense between you two?" "We're not exactly close under the best circumstances," Jake said. "And finding out he cheated on you didn't improve my opinion of him." "I'm sorry. I know he's your brother. He's an adult who made his own choices." Jake's voice was hard. "And those choices have consequences." I felt a flutter of satisfaction. The rift between the brothers was even wider than I'd hoped. Marcus wasn't just losing me to Jake, he was losing Jake too. "Do you think he's happy?" I asked, trying to sound like I was just making conversation. "With Emma?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," he said finally. "Mom mentioned that they've been having problems." My heart jumped. "What kind of problems?" She didn't say. "Just that things have been rocky between them." Jake shrugged. "Honestly, I don't care." Marcus made his bed. I made appropriate sympathetic noises, but inside I was celebrating. Emma and Marcus were having problems. The perfect couple who'd betrayed me were struggling. Maybe the guilt was eating at them. Maybe they were realizing that relationships built on deception and betrayal weren't as solid as they'd thought. Or maybe Emma was discovering that Marcus wasn't as exciting when he wasn't forbidden fruit. The next few months passed in a blur of wedding planning. We set the date for the following spring, just over a year from when we'd met at the charity gala. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd be walking down the aisle exactly a year after I'd discovered Marcus and Emma together. Jake wanted a big wedding, partly because he could afford it, and partly because he wanted to celebrate with everyone we cared about. I agreed, though my motivations were different. I wanted Marcus to see exactly what he'd lost. I wanted him to watch me marry someone better than him in front of all our mutual friends and family. I wanted him to know that his betrayal had led directly to my upgrade. Emma called me in July, 3 months after Jake and I got engaged. "Sarah," she said when I answered the phone. "We need to talk." I hadn't spoken to my sister since the night I'd caught her with Marcus. She'd tried calling and texting dozens of times in the first few weeks, but I'd ignored every attempt. Eventually, she'd stopped trying. "Do we?" I asked. "Please, can we meet for coffee? There are things I need to say." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I wanted to see how miserable she was. Either way, I found myself sitting across from Emma at a Starbucks near my office the next day, studying the woman who'd betrayed me. She looked terrible. Emma had always been the prettier sister, taller, thinner, with better cheekbones and that gorgeous auburn hair. But she'd lost weight in a way that made her look gaunt rather than elegant, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite cover. "You look good," she said, which was true. Happiness and expensive skincare products had done wonders for my complexion. "Engaged life suits you?" I held up my left hand, letting the diamond catch the light. "It does." Emma stared at the ring for a moment, then looked away. "I saw the announcement in the paper. Jake Wheeler. Marcus's brother." "Yes. That's..." She paused, seeming to search for words. That's quite a coincidence. Is it? Emma met my eyes, and I could see that she suspected the truth. Sarah, please tell me you didn't what? Didn't go after Jake to hurt Marcus. I tilted my head, considering the question. Would it matter if I had? Of course it would matter. Emma leaned forward. Sarah, I know you hate me. I know you have every right to hate me. What Marcus and I did was inexcusable. Her voice was shaking. But Jake doesn't deserve to be used as a weapon in some revenge plot. Who says I'm using him? Are you in love with him? Yes, it was the truth, and I could see that Emma heard it in my voice. But that's not why you started dating him. I was quiet for a long moment. Does it matter why something starts if it becomes real? Emma stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. What happened to you? You happened to me. My voice was calm, conversational. You and Marcus happened to me? Sarah, did you know he called me vanilla? I asked. While he was fucking you in my bed, he told you I was vanilla compared to you. Emma's face crumpled. I'm so sorry. I never meant... You meant every bit of it. I leaned back in my chair. You wanted him, so you took him. Just like you've taken everything you wanted since we were kids. That's not true. Isn't it? I smiled, and Emma flinched at the expression. Remember when I got into Northwestern and you threw such a fit that Mom and Dad made me turn down my scholarship so you wouldn't feel bad about going to community college? That's not what happened. Remember when I was dating David Chen in high school and you suddenly developed a crush on him? How you flirted with him at my birthday party until he asked you out instead. Emma's face was white. Sarah, that was high school. You've been taking things from me my entire life. I continued. Opportunities, boyfriends, attention. Our parents always made excuses for you because you were the baby, because you needed more help, because Sarah was responsible and Emma was fragile. Stop! But this time was different. This time you didn't just take something from me. I leaned forward. You gave me something better. Emma stared at me. What do you mean? If you hadn't fucked Marcus, I never would have left him. I would have stayed in that mediocre relationship because I thought it was what I deserved. I held up my ring again. Instead, you freed me to find someone who actually appreciates me. Someone successful and ambitious and completely out of Marcus's league. Sarah, you're scaring me. Am I? I smiled again. Good. Maybe now you'll understand how it felt to discover that the two people I trusted most in the world had been lying to me for months. I stood up, gathering my purse. Enjoy the rest of your life with Marcus, Emma. I hope he's worth everything you gave up for him. I walked away without looking back, but I could feel Emma watching me leave. The conversation had been deeply satisfying, but it had also confirmed something I'd suspected. Emma was having regrets about her choices. The grass wasn't as green on her side of the fence as she'd thought it would be. Perfect. The wedding invitations went out in September. Jake had wanted to keep the guest list small, but I'd convinced him that we should invite everyone, his colleagues, my co-workers, all our friends and extended family. I'd even insisted that we invite Marcus and Emma. Are you sure? Jake had asked when I suggested it. That seems like asking for drama. They're family, I'd said. Besides, I want them to see how happy we are. Jake had agreed, though I could tell he had reservations. The invitations were beautiful, cream cardstock with gold lettering, expensive and elegant. I'd hand-delivered Marcus and Emma's invitation personally, leaving it in Marcus's mailbox with a note, "Hope you can make it. Sarah." They RSVP'd that they would attend. Of course they did. Emma was too curious to stay away, and Marcus probably wanted to prove that he was fine with his brother marrying his ex-girlfriend. The closer we got to the wedding, the more excited I became. Not just because I was marrying Jake, though I was genuinely thrilled about that, but because everything was falling into place exactly as I'd planned. Marcus would have to stand in the audience and watch me marry someone better than him. He'd have to smile for photos and pretend to be happy for his brother. He'd have to face the fact that losing me was the biggest mistake of his life. It was going to be beautiful. 2 weeks before the wedding, Marcus called me. "Sarah," he said when I answered. "It's Marcus." "I know. What do you want? Can we meet?" "I need to talk to you." "About what?" "About Jake. About the wedding." He paused. "About us." "There is no us, Marcus. I know that. But there are things I need to say, and I'd rather say them in person." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I wanted to see him grovel. Either way, I found myself sitting across from Marcus in a coffee shop, studying the man I'd once thought I'd marry. He looked older than his 28 years, stress and guilt etched into the lines around his eyes. His hair needed a cut, and his shirt was wrinkled like he'd slept in it. He'd always been a little soft around the edges, but now he looked deflated. "You look good," he said, echoing Emma's words from our coffee meeting. "Thank you." "Happy." "I am happy." Marcus nodded, staring into his coffee cup. "I'm glad. You deserve to be happy." "Do I?" "That's not what you and Emma seemed to think when you were laughing about how boring I was." He flinched. "We never said you were boring." "Vanilla, then." "Same thing." "Sarah?" Marcus looked up, and I could see genuine pain in his eyes. "I was an ass. What Emma and I did to you was unforgivable. But we never thought you were boring or vanilla or any of those things." "Then why did you cheat on me with my sister?" The question hung in the air between us. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I'm weak," he said. "Because Emma made me feel wanted in a way I'd never felt before. Because I was too much of a coward to end things with you before starting something with her." He looked up. "But mostly because I'm an idiot who didn't realize what he had until it was gone." "You're right," I said. "You are an idiot." Marcus smiled ruefully. "I know. Emma tells me that pretty regularly these days." "Trouble in paradise?" His smile faded. "Something like that." "I'm sorry to hear that." I wasn't sorry at all, but it seemed like the appropriate thing to say. "Are you—" Marcus studied my face. "Because I get the feeling you're not surprised." "Should I be? Relationships that start with betrayal don't usually end well." "Is that why you're marrying Jake?" The question came out sharp, accusatory. "To prove a point?" "I'm marrying Jake because I love him." "But that's not the only reason, is it?" I stared at Marcus, this man who'd shared my bed and my life for 3 years and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no hurt, no lingering affection. Just a cold, clinical assessment of his weaknesses and failures. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I want you to call off the wedding." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Excuse me? Jake doesn't deserve this. He doesn't deserve to be used as a weapon against me." "Who says I'm using him?" "Come on, Sarah. You expect me to believe it's a coincidence that you're marrying my brother? That you just happen to fall in love with the one person guaranteed to hurt me the most?" I leaned forward, and when I spoke, my voice was deadly calm. "You think this is about you? Isn't it? Marcus, you are the most narcissistic person I've ever met if you think I'm planning my entire future around hurting you." "Then why—" "Because Jake is everything you're not." The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't regret them. "He's successful, ambitious, emotionally mature. He treats me like I'm the most important person in his world instead of an obligation he has to deal with." Marcus looked like I'd slapped him. "Jake makes me want to be better," I continued. "He challenges me, supports me, makes me laugh. He's the kind of man I should have been looking for instead of wasting 3 years on someone who was never going to be enough." "Sarah, you want to know why I'm marrying Jake? Because he's the best thing that ever happened to me. And if that hurts you, if it makes you realize what you threw away, then that's just a bonus." I stood up, gathering my purse. "Don't contact me again, Marcus. And don't you dare try to ruin my wedding with your guilt and self-pity." I walked away, leaving Marcus sitting alone in the coffee shop, and felt a deep satisfaction settle in my chest. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks I'd be Mrs. Jake Wheeler, and Marcus would have to live with the knowledge that he'd lost the best thing that ever happened to him. The revenge was almost complete. The morning of my wedding dawned clear and bright, a perfect October day with golden sunlight streaming through the windows of the bridal suite. I'd woken up early, too excited and nervous to sleep, and spent the morning being pampered by a small army of hair and makeup artists. My dress was perfect, a classic A-line with delicate lace sleeves and a train that would photograph beautifully. My hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and my makeup was flawless. I looked like a bride from a fairy tale, which seemed appropriate since I was about to get my happily ever after. "You look stunning," my mother said, appearing in the mirror behind me. She'd been crying on and off all morning, overwhelmed with emotion at seeing her daughter get married. "Thank you." I turned to face her. "Mom, I know, sweetheart." She pulled me into a careful hug, mindful of my dress and makeup. "I'm so proud of you. And I'm so happy you found Jake. Even though the situation with Marcus is complicated?" Mom pulled back, studying my face. "Honey, Marcus was never right for you. I always thought you were settling." She smiled. "Jake, on the other hand, is exactly what you deserve. If only she knew the whole truth. But that was a conversation for another day, if ever." The ceremony was being held at a historic mansion on the outskirts of the city, with the reception following in the same location. Jake and I had chosen the venue because it was beautiful and elegant, but also because it was large enough to accommodate all our guests. I wanted everyone we knew to witness this moment. As I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, I scanned the faces in the audience. Friends from work, college roommates, extended family, Jake's colleagues, and law school friends. And there, in the third row on the right, Marcus and Emma. Emma was wearing a navy blue dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her auburn hair styled in perfect waves. She looked beautiful, but there was something hollow in her eyes that makeup couldn't disguise. Marcus sat beside her in a suit that didn't quite fit right, his face carefully blank. I smiled at them as I passed, a brilliant, genuinely happy smile, and I saw Marcus's composure crack slightly. Good. Let him see exactly what he'd lost. But then I saw Jake waiting for me at the altar, handsome in his black tuxedo, his blue eyes bright with tears of joy, and I forgot about Marcus entirely. This was my wedding day. This was the beginning of my new life with the man I loved. The ceremony was perfect. Jake's vows made me cry, and mine made him cry, and when we kissed as husband and wife, the audience erupted in applause. We walked back down the aisle together, and I caught Emma's eye as we passed. She was crying, but they didn't look like happy tears. The reception was everything I'd dreamed of. The food was exquisite, the wine was expensive, and the band was fantastic. Jake and I had our first dance to At Last, and I'd never felt more complete than I did in that moment, spinning around the dance floor in my husband's arms. Happy? Jake murmured in my ear. Ecstatic, I replied, and meant it. We made the rounds, thanking guests and taking photos, playing the part of the blissful newlyweds. Because that's what we were, even if my path to this happiness had been unconventional. I was talking to some of Jake's law school friends when I saw Marcus approaching. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his tie as he waited for a break in the conversation. "Sarah?" he said when the other guests moved away. "Could I have a word?" I glanced around, looking for Jake, but he was on the other side of the room talking to my uncle. "What is it, Marcus?" "I just wanted to say—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "I wanted to say that I'm happy for you. For both of you. Thank you. Jake's a good man. Better than me." His voice was barely audible over the music. "You made the right choice." I studied his face, looking for signs of sarcasm or manipulation, but I saw only genuine regret and resignation. "I know I did," I said softly. Marcus nodded. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved so much better than what I gave you." "Yes, I did." He smiled sadly. "I hope you'll be happy, Sarah. I hope Jake gives you everything you've ever wanted." "He already has?" Marcus looked like he wanted to say something else, but then Jake appeared at my side, sliding his arm around my waist. "Marcus?" Jake said coolly. "Thanks for coming. Thanks for inviting me." Marcus's voice was steady, but I could see the pain in his eyes as he looked at us together. "You're lucky to have her." "I know," Jake said, and there was a possessive edge to his voice that made my pulse quicken. Marcus nodded once more and walked away, disappearing back into the crowd. I watched him go, and for the first time in over a year, I felt something that might have been pity. "You okay?" Jake asked. "Perfect," I said, turning to smile at my husband. "Everything is perfect." And it was. Marcus had seen me marry someone better than him. Emma had watched her betrayal lead directly to my upgrade. Our friends and family had witnessed my fairy tale ending. The revenge was complete, and it was everything I'd hoped it would be. But as Jake spun me around the dance floor later that night, as we laughed and celebrated with the people we loved, I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. The best revenge wasn't making Marcus suffer. The best revenge was being genuinely, completely happy without him. And I was Mrs. Jake Wheeler now, and that was worth more than any elaborate revenge plot. Marcus could live with his regrets and his failing relationship with Emma. I had everything I'd ever wanted, and I'd earned it by being smart enough to recognize a good thing when I saw it. The girl Marcus had called Vanilla had just married the most successful, attractive, accomplished man any of us had ever known. Let him choke on that.